She just wanted to buy fresh vegetables straight from the garden. He was a charming man who offered help to carry the boxes of tomatoes. An unlikely love was born there, among plantings and fruit trees. And now she carries 3 hearts beating in her womb, without knowing that he's the owner of that large organic farm. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. A gust of warm air brushed across Bianca's face as she stepped out of her small car and onto the gravel parking lot. Before her stretched endless rows of vegetables, their leaves glimmering under a fierce midday sun. She paused, lifting a hand to shield her eyes, and took a moment to inhale the scent of tilled earth. Despite the heat, a gentle breeze carried the aroma of tomatoes ripening on the vine, mingled with the grassy smell of the surrounding fields. It was the kind of pure, vibrant setting she'd been longing to experience for her latest cooking projects. She headed down a wide, dusty path, checking a handwritten list on a crumpled piece of paper. There were so many ingredients she needed: perfectly ripe tomatoes, crisp peppers, fresh broccoli. With a large event looming that evening, every vegetable had to be top quality. She could already imagine her friends savoring the results of her new recipes, and she felt a surge of determination to make this meal special. Carrying a basket on each arm, Bianca walked carefully between tall stalks of corn and neat rows of lettuce, mindful not to crush any fragile seedlings. Her sneakers crunched on the scattered pebbles, and she winced at how heavy her first set of vegetables felt. She was a decent cook, but no bodybuilder. Still, she refused to let exhaustion spoil her mood. A drop of sweat slid down her temple, but she bit back her discomfort. Getting these ingredients straight from the source, so fresh, so ripe, was worth every bead of perspiration. At the edge of a row of tomato plants, she knelt and plucked a few more of the plumpest ones she could find. As she stood, trying to balance the weight of the baskets, a low, friendly voice came from behind. "Need a hand with those?" She whirled around, almost dropping the produce. A man she hadn't noticed before stood there, his smile warm but reserved. He wore a casual plaid shirt rolled to the elbows, a battered cap shading his eyes, and boots that looked well worn from hours of farm work. There was something immediately likable about him, maybe the easy posture or the faint kindness in his gaze. Bianca cleared her throat. Yes, actually. That would be fantastic. Thank you." He slipped one basket from her arm with a gentle touch and placed it onto a nearby table used for sorting. "They're heavier than they look, aren't they?" he remarked, eyeing the overflowing mound of produce. "You have no idea," she replied, pressing a hand to her back and rolling her shoulders. "But the tomatoes are beautiful. It's hard to stop myself from buying more." He studied the bright red tomatoes and nodded. "They're at their peak this week. Great choice for cooking." Bianca blinked, a little surprised. "You sound like you really know your produce." A shy smile tugged at his lips. "I spend enough time around it." Then he extended a hand. "I'm Richard." "Bianca," she said, returning the handshake. "Nice to meet you." A faint flush crept into her cheeks from more than just the heat. Perhaps it was exhaustion, but she found herself oddly flustered by the soft warmth in his eyes. They hovered in that moment, baskets of vegetables around them, as if caught in an unexpected pause. She felt a flutter in her chest, an awareness that this was more than a run-of-the-mill shopping trip. Her phone trilled from her pocket, disrupting the moment. Balancing the baskets again, she fished it out. On the screen, Lorena's name blinked insistently. She mouthed an apology to Richard before answering. "Hey, I'm almost done. Don't worry," Bianca said quickly into the phone. "Yes, I know dinner's tonight. I won't be late. Yes, I'll text you. Bye." She ended the call and gave Richard a sheepish smile. "That was my friend. She's helping me prepare for a small gathering. She thinks I'm running late." Richard seemed to understand the urgency. He helped gather the remaining vegetables with practiced efficiency and followed Bianca toward a dusty pickup truck she'd rented for the day. Every so often she noticed his admiring glances at the vibrant tomatoes or the perfect heads of broccoli. His quiet appreciation for the produce made her even more excited to cook with it. They were just starting to load the back of the truck when an angry voice cut through the warm afternoon air. "Hey, where do you think you're going with all that?" Bianca froze and turned toward the voice. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a stained cap glared at her from a few steps away. He crossed his arms over his chest and spat to the side. She recognized him as the foreman she'd passed earlier in the distance. At the time, he'd paid her no mind, but now his gaze burned with hostility. Richard stepped forward, his tone calm but firm. "Is there a problem?" "You bet there's a problem," the foreman snapped. "I see a whole load of produce and no sign of payment. We don't just give stuff away for free here." Bianca's stomach lurched. She hugged one basket against her hip. "But I was planning to pay at the main office like the sign said." The man narrowed his eyes. "Office is closed for lunch. You can't just waltz off with all this." Before Bianca could respond, Richard placed a steadying hand on her shoulder and spoke up again. "I'll handle the payment as soon as the office reopens. We have everything itemized." "Oh, you will you?" The foreman looked him up and down. "And who do you think you are, telling me how payment's handled?" Bianca felt her cheeks grow hot. She was an honest customer, just trying to make a meal. Why was this man acting so aggressive? She grasped the edges of the basket, trying to muster enough confidence to defend herself, but Richard caught her eye and gave a small shake of his head, urging her to hold back. Calmly, he said, "I understand you're responsible for inventory, but I'm letting you know it's covered. She's not stealing anything." The foreman's posture stiffened, and for a moment, Bianca thought he might take a swing at either one of them. Tension rippled through the air, thick as the summer heat. Then he lunged forward, giving Richard's shoulder a push. It wasn't enough to send him flying, but the blatant aggression stunned Bianca, who gasped and stumbled back. Richard refused to budge. "That's enough," he warned, his voice low. "We'll settle everything fairly." The foreman took another step, jabbing a finger into Richard's chest. "Don't tell me what's enough. This is my area, and I say the girl doesn't leave with all that till she pays in cash." Bianca's heart slammed against her ribs. Her gaze darted around, noticing a few farm workers gathering at the edges of the parking lot, whispering among themselves. The way they watched Richard, with alarm or maybe admiration, left her confused. Were they expecting him to call the shots? One of the workers said something under his breath that sounded a lot like, "Careful, boss is here." The word lodged itself in her mind, but she barely had time to dwell on it as the foreman turned his attention back to her. "Look here," he growled. "You might think you can sweet-talk your way off the property with free produce, but that's not what's happening," Bianca managed, voice unsteady. "I promised to pay." "She's not leaving empty-handed," Richard stated, "and neither is she running off. If you have a problem, take it up with me." That only intensified the glare in the foreman's eyes. He swung an arm in frustration, nearly knocking over a crate of peppers. For a split second, Bianca worried this could turn into a full brawl. Her stomach twisted with disbelief, a simple grocery run turning into a showdown. It felt unreal and unsettling. "Stand aside," Richard said, his calm unwavering, "or you'll regret it." Maybe it was the way he carried himself, or the authority lacing his voice, but something changed in that moment. The foreman's posture slackened. He spat once more onto the ground, then pointed a dirty finger in Bianca's direction. "Fine," he muttered, stepping away. "But this isn't over." Bianca exhaled, her legs trembling. She clutched the basket tightly, uncertain what to say. As the foreman stormed off, Richard gently guided her toward the driver's seat of the truck. Across the parking lot, the onlooking farm workers began to disperse, still eyeing Richard with a mix of respect and caution. She felt questions piling up in her mind but had no clue how to phrase them. "Are you okay?" he asked, his expression laced with concern. She nodded, though her pulse continued to race. He offered a reassuring half-smile, closing the truck's tailgate. The air practically buzzed with unspoken thoughts. Why did everyone act like Richard was in charge? Who exactly was he? Bianca swallowed down the chaos swirling in her head. She wished she had time to pry answers from him right then, but the day was already slipping away, and she had a meal to prepare. "Thank you," she murmured. "You really helped me." "I just did what needed to be done," he replied softly, stepping back so she could open the door. "Make sure you drive safely." She nodded, still feeling a little unsteady, and turned the key in the ignition. When she glanced in the rearview mirror, she saw him watching her pull away, arms folded across his chest, a pensive look shading his features. There was a thoughtfulness to him that she couldn't quite decode, something that made her instinctively want to trust him. As she navigated down the dusty path leading away from the fields, the tension in her shoulders slowly eased. Yet her mind remained restless. Why did the foreman keep implying she was stealing? And why had he shown such obvious fear of Richard, even though Richard claimed to be just another worker on the farm? Nothing about the situation made sense, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't forget that clear display of authority or the way everyone seemed to defer to him at the last second. A renewed gust of wind rattled the window, and Bianca glanced at the crates of tomatoes and broccoli, feeling a rush of gratitude that she'd secured them after all. But she couldn't help sensing that she'd stumbled into something bigger than a routine ingredient run. Something about the way Richard had stood his ground, the murmurs of the onlookers, and the foreman's fury pointed to a deeper story, one she was now unwittingly a part of. She clenched the steering wheel, her heart still racing in her chest, and let out a long breath. She drove on, miles slipping away beneath the tires, yet the image of him lingered in her thoughts, as did the memory of how the crowd parted for him. It was a moment she knew she'd replay again and again, at least until she got some answers. Bianca couldn't shake the feeling that there's far more to Richard than meets the eye, and that this farm visit is about to change her life in unforeseen ways. Bianca hadn't slept well after that tense encounter at the farm. In the quiet space of her apartment, she kept recalling the way the foreman backed down when Richard had calmly intervened. Something about the looks the other workers gave Richard, and the near-reverent way some addressed him, nagged at her. Who exactly was he? The next morning she woke early to a dull headache and the distant hum of traffic. She'd promised herself she'd only buy produce from this farm for the upcoming weekend dinner. Nothing could compare to how fresh it was. But she also knew she wasn't returning just for vegetables. A knot of curiosity sat in her chest, tugging her back. Whether it was the memory of Richard's warm smile or the baffling authority he seemed to hold, she couldn't stop thinking about him. After gulping down coffee and grabbing her keys, she headed out before rush hour clogged the roads. The rising sun barely peeked over the city skyline as she maneuvered her car onto the rural highway. With each mile, the scenery shifted from concrete to rolling fields, and she felt an unexpected flutter in her stomach. Was she foolish to head back so soon, after such a dramatic scene? She forced that worry aside and focused on the fresh produce she still needed. That was the official reason, she told herself. Her mind, however, kept returning to Richard's steady voice and kind demeanor. Her phone buzzed just as she turned onto the gravel road leading to the farm. A glance at the screen told her it was Lorena. Bianca chuckled under her breath. Lorena had an uncanny sense of timing. She parked beneath a crooked wooden sign welcoming visitors and picked up the call. "You're at the farm again, aren't you?" Lorena asked immediately, voice thick with amusement. Bianca sighed. "Yes, and before you ask, it's because the vegetables were top-notch. Don't read into it." A playful laugh crackled on the other end. "Sure, I'm just saying, you've never driven all the way out to the same farm 2 days in a row." "Lorena," Bianca began, "I'm busy and I really do need more produce." "Uh-huh. Right. Well, keep me posted, especially if you happen to see that mysterious farmhand again." Bianca felt her cheeks warm. "He's not mysterious," She lied, though a small tingle in her stomach betrayed her real feelings. She quickly said goodbye before Lorena could tease her further and ended the call. She stepped out of the car, adjusting her messenger bag over her shoulder. A sense of calm settled over her as she looked around. Rows of fruit trees stretched into the distance, their leaves shimmering under the gentle morning light. She inhaled deeply, enjoying the crispness of the air, free from the city's haze. No sooner had she taken a few steps than she spotted Richard near a small wooden stand, looking every bit as relaxed as he had the previous day. He wore the same style of rolled-up sleeves displaying tanned forearms, and he was talking to an older farmer. When his eyes landed on Bianca, she thought she saw them spark with recognition. Her pulse skipped. "Good morning," he greeted, making his way toward her with an easy stride. "Back so soon?" Bianca tried to sound casual. "I realized I needed more produce for the recipes I'm testing this week. Yours is the best I've found." He nodded, a hint of a smile flickering across his face. "Well, I'm glad you like it here." They fell into step together, heading toward the orchard. She noted how his pace stayed slow, matching hers. From behind them, she heard the older farmer call out a polite, "Morning, boss," but the words were muffled in the shuffle of feet and rustling leaves. She paused, blinking in surprise, but Richard kept walking as if he hadn't heard. A gentle breeze passed between the rows of trees, carrying the sweet fragrance of ripening peaches. They were so vibrant that Bianca found herself running a hand lightly over the fuzzy skin of the fruit as she strolled. "You come to the orchard often?" she asked, picking up a soft peach in her hand. "Whenever I can," he answered. "I like checking on the trees, making sure everything's growing well." "You sound like the caretaker," she teased, raising an eyebrow. "Most farms I've visited, the workers seem to specialize in different tasks. But you?" He glanced at her. "I guess you could say I like to dip my hands in every aspect. Never been one to sit still behind a desk." The orchard path curved gently, the ground turning slightly muddy in some patches from a recent watering of the fields. Overhead, the sky was still bright, but Bianca spotted darker clouds looming in the distance. She drew in a breath, imagining how rain would feel here, among the fruit-laden branches. They continued to chat about her recipes, zesty tomato sauces, grilled vegetables, dishes that highlighted the farm's produce. She admitted she was still finding her culinary niche, but that creating fresh, healthy meals brought her real joy. "Healthy, fresh, sustainable," she said, brushing a leaf off her dress. "It's always been my dream to open a small catering business that focuses on that. It's why I'm so particular about where I get my ingredients." "I think it's great," he replied, pausing to steady a large branch that was bent under the weight of growing fruit. "Good products deserve respect. Like that list you have, it's really thorough." She stopped short, blinking in surprise. "How do you—" He flushed slightly. I noticed yesterday you had a list you kept checking. I assumed it was for a specific set of recipes." She gave a soft laugh. "I do have a reputation for being a bit too organized." His eyes warmed with sincerity. "Not at all. It shows you care about quality." They strolled on, the orchard's path leading to a wide clearing dotted with more crates of produce. In the corner sat a rusty old tractor and stacks of wooden pallets. Bianca noticed dark clouds inching closer, the air growing heavy with the possibility of rain. Richard opened an oversized umbrella he'd found leaning against the tractor. "Might need this soon," he said, tapping the cloth canopy. "The weather can change fast out here." A single drop of rain plunked onto Bianca's arm, making her jump. She laughed at the timing, and he held the umbrella above them both. A sudden closeness fell between them, the hush of the orchard punctuated by raindrops tapping the leaves. Bianca felt her breath quicken, heat spreading over her cheeks again. They moved together under the canopy, the gentle drizzle building into a steadier shower. She found it strangely comforting to hear the patter of rain on the umbrella's surface. It felt like their own tiny world. separated from the rest of the bustling farm by a curtain of raindrops. An abrupt phone buzz came from her bag. She pulled it out to see Lorena's name flashing again. Shooting Richard an apologetic look, she turned slightly away, trying to keep the phone dry beneath the umbrella. "Hello?" Lorena's voice was crackly from the poor signal. "Are you actually in the orchard right now? I hope you're not getting drenched." Bianca smiled faintly. "I'm fine. I'm under an umbrella." "So," Lorena's tone dripped with curiosity, "is that helpful farmhand around, or—" "Lorena, please," Bianca hissed softly. "I'll call you back." She ended the call, hoping Richard hadn't caught too much of the conversation. When she glanced up, he was politely pretending to examine a crate of peaches. The rain lightened, and they made their way back toward the main path. Bianca noticed a farm worker across the yard wave at Richard and call out, "Morning, boss!" This time the word hit her ears clearly. She turned, eyebrows raised, but the worker was already lugging crates away. She faced him. "Did I hear them call you boss again?" His eyes flickered with something that looked like guilt or embarrassment. "They call the supervisors that sometimes." She frowned, not quite buying it. "But you told me you just do a bit of everything around here." "It's complicated," he said, eyes shifting to the dripping orchard trees. I've... She waited, a slight crease forming between her brows. But instead of a direct explanation, he closed the umbrella, gave it a brisk shake, and changed the topic. "Let's head to the packing station. You mentioned needing a few more things besides peaches, right?" A pang of disappointment washed over her. She reminded herself they'd only just met, and everyone had their reasons for not revealing everything up front. Still, curiosity gnawed at her. Something about his presence felt undeniably genuine, yet half the farm insisted on calling him boss. The contradiction made her want answers. They stepped under a small awning, finding shelter from the last of the drizzle. Through a wide window, Bianca glimpsed workers busy sorting apples, boxing them up for shipment. The air smelled of damp wood and fruit, a comforting blend that momentarily distracted her from her questions. He dug around in a storage chest, pulling out a stack of empty crates. "If you need apples, we have several varieties. Same for pears, too. I can ring them up with a discount, as a thank you for coming all this way." She tilted her head. "I appreciate that, but you've already been so helpful. Why the discount?" His gaze wavered a bit. "Let's just say I like encouraging folks who truly value fresh produce." Bianca bit her lip, unsure how to respond. Yesterday she'd witnessed him fending off that overbearing foreman. Today he was graciously offering discounts and using that same calm, confident tone. Her mind kept circling back to the question, if he was just a helpful worker, how did he hold sway over pricing and handle confrontations like it was second nature? Thunder rumbled softly in the distance. The earlier drizzle had tapered off, but the sky remained dark above them. Richard gestured for her to follow him along a narrow path that led to a separate cluster of farm buildings. They passed a towering structure with padlocked double doors, and Bianca noticed multiple employees-only signs. She glanced at them as they walked by. "I've never seen some of these facilities on smaller farms," she remarked. Richard nodded. "This place is bigger than most folks realize. Some areas are off limits to visitors, mainly for safety. Machines, chemicals, you know the drill." He guided her around a corner, away from the locked building, and Bianca realized he was deliberately shifting her attention from the restricted zone. Her curiosity blazed higher. She resolved to mention it at some point, maybe the next time she visited. Right now, she could tell he was uncomfortable discussing it. A fresh swirl of wind rustled the leaves overhead. Raindrops sparkled along the orchard floor. Bianca paused for a moment, watching them glisten like tiny diamonds. Something about the setting felt surreal. The hushed beauty of a farm after rain, combined with a man whose every action hinted at something he wasn't saying, wrapped her in an odd, almost enchanting mood. He set down the crates near a small side building, then turned back to her, a trace of apology in his eyes. "If it's not too forward, maybe we could meet again. When you're free, of course. I can show you more of the orchard, maybe where we keep some of our special crops." Bianca's breath caught. Despite her misgivings, her heart fluttered at the idea. "I'd like that." They walked back to her car together, glancing up at the glowering sky. The promise of another shower was evident in the thick clouds overhead. She fished her keys from her bag, a swirl of conflicting thoughts flooding her mind. The conflicting employee versus boss signals, the subdued tension she sensed beneath his gentle courtesy, and her own growing interest in him. He rested a hand on the truck's tailgate as she loaded a crate of peaches inside. "Take care," he said softly. "Let me know if you need anything." She mumbled a quick thanks, feeling warmth spread across her face again. The strangest part was that for all the confusion she felt safe around him. There was a sincerity to Richard even when he seemed torn about what to reveal. Her only fear was stepping blindly into something she might later regret. A sudden chill gust of wind whipped her hair across her face, and she looked up at a sky that had turned charcoal gray. The first heavy raindrops splattered on the truck. Richard held out the umbrella once more, this time gesturing for her to hurry inside. She climbed behind the wheel and lowered the window. He leaned in, a faint grin on his lips. "Drive safe. I'll see you soon?" Bianca managed a small smile in return. "Soon," she repeated, her voice scarcely above a whisper. As she pulled away, the rhythmic thump of raindrops on the roof filled her ears, and she watched him in the side mirror, arm raised in a gentle wave. He stood there until the orchard's trees swallowed his figure. Her heart hammered, weighed down by how effortlessly he stirred her interest, and how many secrets might lurk beneath that kind demeanor. Dark clouds released a steady downpour as she reached the main road, making the car tires slip briefly on the wet gravel. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel and sucked in a bracing breath. This wasn't just an ordinary produce run. She felt drawn to the farm and to Richard in ways she couldn't explain. Yet a sharp pang of uncertainty churned in her gut. Would the mysteries she sensed around him pull her into something dangerous? She pictured his quiet confidence, the way others called him boss, and the locked buildings hidden behind caution signs. Water streamed down the windshield, blurring her vision of the orchard behind her, but not the questions echoing in her mind. As rain started to fall, Bianca wonders just what secrets lie behind Richard's careful smile and whether getting closer to him could land her in deeper trouble than she imagines. Even after the stormy drive home, Bianca couldn't stop thinking about the orchard and the way rain had glistened in Richard's dark hair as he sheltered them both under that umbrella. A tension she couldn't define had bloomed between them, tender and yet laced with questions. Something about the soft tone in his voice, paired with the wary looks of the other farm workers, lingered in her mind. The more she dwelled on it, the more convinced she became that there were layers to him she hadn't begun to uncover. Her small kitchen bustled with activity the next morning. Bowls, cutting boards, and plates crowded every surface. She had a major dinner planned in a few days, and she was determined to showcase the farm-fresh ingredients she'd collected. Tossing ripe tomatoes into a pot to simmer, she glanced at her phone, half expecting a message from Richard. The light on her device remained dark. She huffed quietly, stirring her sauce. Would it be odd to text him first? They weren't officially anything, but he'd saved her number when offering discounts on produce. Part of her worried she might be overstepping, while another part was impatient. The gentle connection they'd shared in the orchard left her craving more conversation. Late that afternoon, she finished bottling a batch of tomato sauce and decided to go for it. She typed out a quick message. "Hey, hope you're doing well. My tomato sauce turned out amazing, all thanks to that produce. Busy day?" She hovered over the send button, rereading it, then pressed it before she lost her nerve. An hour later, just as she was finishing a marinade for grilled veggies, her phone chimed. Her heart did a small flip. His reply was polite and friendly, thanking her for the message and mentioning he'd been tied up with some farm business. No details, but he also said he'd love to hear more about her recipes. It was enough to put a small smile on her face. That evening, Bianca felt restless. In her cozy living room, the TV droned on aimlessly, and she kept pacing to the windows, glancing at the starry sky. The city lights glowed in the distance. She couldn't shake a sudden impulse to drive back to the farm, to see it in a different light, maybe quiet and hushed after dark. She reasoned with herself. It's better to pick up extra produce early in the morning, she told her reflection in the glass. Yet some unstoppable urge pushed her to grab her keys. When she arrived, the moon was high. Most workers had left for the night, and the roads within the farmland were almost empty. A few lampposts cast cones of warm light across the ground, revealing trucks and tractors parked in neat rows. She pulled off to the side, careful not to draw attention to her unannounced visit. Stepping out, she breathed in deeply, the air cool and scented faintly with cut grass. Crickets chirped from somewhere near the orchard, and a gentle wind stirred the leaves. She wandered cautiously among the buildings, her footsteps hushed on gravel. She didn't see anyone at first, just tall silhouettes of barns and a scattering of lights in the distance. Passing the main barn, she glimpsed a brighter glow seeping under the door of a smaller structure. The door itself was locked and secured with a chain, but inside, faint voices rose and fell. She recognized Richard's low timbre. Edging closer, she placed her hand lightly on the weathered wood, heart thumping. She knew eavesdropping was wrong, but curiosity tugged at her. "Not going as planned," came Richard's voice, muffled through the door. "If we can't secure better deals, we'll lose the entire harvest to competitor pricing. We'd need bigger investments." Someone else responded, words too blurred for Bianca to catch. She strained to hear. The mention of major investments repeated, followed by Richard's frustrated sigh. He sounded weighed down, far from the calm presence he'd shown around her. Suddenly, she heard a clatter inside and the sound of hurried footsteps. Panicking, Bianca darted behind a tall stack of empty crates. She pressed herself against them, breath shallow, as the door swung open. In the warm lamplight spilling out, she caught a glimpse of Richard stepping outside, a phone pressed to his ear. He lifted his free hand in a gesture of impatience or anger. "No, that's not an option," he said into the phone, pacing a few steps away. "I'm not selling any part of this property just to appease them. I have my own plan. Of course I'm serious." His voice trailed off as he wandered out of sight, presumably to continue the call in privacy. Bianca's heart hammered as she slid to the ground. She felt like an intruder, hearing him speak of big financial negotiations. Why hadn't he mentioned any of this to her? Why pretend to be just another friendly farmhand? Her mind spun, recalling how the other workers called him boss, the locked warehouses, and the sense that there was more to him, much more. Before she could gather herself enough to leave, a gruff voice made her jump. "Sneaking around again, are we?" She looked up in alarm. It was the same foreman who'd harassed her before, arms folded across his chest, looming a few paces away. She scrambled to her feet, fumbling for an explanation. I just came to see—" "Don't matter," he snarled. "You city folks never learn. Think you can come out here whenever you like, rummage around, spy on things that ain't your business?" He took a step closer, forcing her back against the crates. "I warned you once, girl." Bianca's pulse thundered. "I'm not spying. She felt ice run through her veins, but determined not to show fear, she squared her shoulders. It's about the produce. I came to—" "Save it," he growled. "We both know your real reason for poking your nose around here." His tone dripped with contempt. "Should have never let you out of that scuffle last time. Now you're back, sniffing around again." He advanced threateningly, and she braced herself, ready to shout for help, when a voice sliced through the tension. "Back off!" Richard commanded, emerging from the dark. The phone in his hand was gone. He must have pocketed it. "You heard me. Leave her alone." The foreman sneered but lowered his stance. For a moment, Bianca thought they might come to blows again. Then the older man took a step back, muttering curses under his breath. With one last hostile glare at Bianca, he stomped away into the shadows. Still shaking, Bianca looked at Richard, who studied her with genuine concern. "Are you okay? Did he hurt you?" She swallowed hard. "No, he scared me. I didn't mean to pry, I promise." Silence lingered between them, the night air thick with tension. Richard glanced at the locked building where the lamplight still glowed. "It's not safe to wander around alone at this hour. There's a lot going on here, more than you realize." He guided her a little farther from the building, taking her gently by the arm. His eyes flickered with worry and something else, reluctance perhaps. "Are you all right?" he asked again. "I'm fine," she managed, though her voice trembled. "But Richard, what's really happening here? It feels like every time I come, there's some new conflict, and that foreman hates me. And you—" She paused, searching his face. "You're involved in meetings about investments. You have locked warehouses, and everyone calls you boss." He set his jaw, looking torn. "It's complicated." "Complicated how?" she pressed, feeling a rush of boldness from the adrenaline in her veins. "Because people keep treating you like you own the place, but you never said anything about that. Why are you hiding?" He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "I didn't want you to see me differently. I'm responsible for this farm, for all the operations here. There's a lot of pressure, and some people, like that foreman you just ran into, don't appreciate the changes I'm making." Bianca's heart pounded. She recalled the conversation she'd overheard. "So you're not just some nice guy who helps customers carry produce?" His lips twitched into a faint, guilty smile. "I am a nice guy, I hope. But yeah, I'm also overseeing a bigger enterprise than you realize." She exhaled, her mind spinning. So her instincts had been correct. There was a hidden side to him. But that only spawned more questions. "What are you dealing with exactly? You sounded so stressed, talking on your phone about suppliers and losing the harvest." He hesitated, looking as though he might give her a real explanation. Then his phone buzzed, and he glanced at it, brow furrowing. "I'm sorry. There's another urgent issue I need to handle. Let's talk more when it's safer, okay?" Unsettled by his vague promise, Bianca nodded, though it left her unsatisfied. "All right," she murmured. "But no more secrets, Richard. Please." His hand hovered near her arm, then gave it a gentle squeeze. "No more secrets," he said softly. "At least, not the important ones." He guided her back to her car, scanning the darkened parking area for any lingering threats. Under the thin glow of a single floodlight, she caught the weariness in his expression. It jolted her to see him, always so collected, now weighed down by worry. Once she was safely behind the wheel, he leaned through the open window. "Be careful driving back. I'll call you soon." She gave a shaky nod. "Thanks, but you be careful too." As she pulled away, the headlights illuminated rows of crops and the edges of industrial-looking buildings. Everything felt eerily larger than before, like the farmland was some grand stage for a drama she barely understood. She looked in the rearview mirror, seeing Richard's silhouette framed by the light, arms folded as he watched her go, tension coiling in his stance. A shiver rippled through her. Whatever conflict had him constantly on edge, she sensed it would only grow more complicated. And yet, she was in too deep to pretend none of it mattered. The memory of the foreman's menacing glare was fresh in her mind. The knowledge that Richard was far more than a simple worker made her gut twist in equal parts excitement and dread. She fumbled for her phone once she hit the main road, dialing Lorena's number. The phone rang twice before Lorena answered, sounding half asleep. "Bianca, do you know what time it is?" "Lorena," she breathed. "I'm at the farm. Things got intense. That creepy foreman threatened me again, and Richard, he's more than a worker. He's in charge here, maybe the owner. But there are bigger problems going on, something about deals and investors." "Hey, slow down," Lorena interrupted, voice suddenly alert. "This doesn't sound safe. You need to be careful. Bianca gripped the wheel, tension still thrumming through her body. I know, but I can't just walk away. There's this huge mess and I feel like I stumbled into the middle of it, but I can't ignore it now. Lorena sighed heavily. All right, but promise me you'll watch your back, and call if you need help. I will, Bianca said, hoping she sounded more confident than she felt. After hanging up, she turned onto a deserted stretch of highway. The night sky twinkled overhead, stars spread like scattered gems across the darkness. Somewhere behind her, Richard was grappling with a battle he hadn't fully explained. She felt strangely protective, yet also a nagging fear twisted in her stomach. When she finally parked in front of her apartment, she rested her forehead against the steering wheel for a moment. She felt as though each visit to the farm unraveled another knot of secrets, only to reveal a thicker tangle beneath. Yet she couldn't turn away from Richard's gentle sincerity or the current of empathy she felt for him. Whatever was happening on that farm, it was big, and she wasn't about to be chased off. Bianca senses something far larger is at play, and this time, she's determined to uncover the truth, even if it puts her at risk. Bianca's mood was torn between eager excitement and a persistent knot of apprehension as she prepped for her weekend catering gig. The sweet tang of tomatoes and herbs simmered on her stovetop, and her phone lay on the table, screen dark except for the occasional flicker of a notification. This time, she refused to let fears overshadow her passion for cooking. She was bent on making the event a success, all the while aware that her next visit to the farm would bring her face to face with Richard, and most likely, that foreman once again. She loaded her kitchen supplies into the trunk of her small car, double-checking that she had enough containers for any surplus produce. Her thoughts drifted to the unsettling tension she'd witnessed. Richard's hushed negotiations in a locked building, the foreman's aggression, and the cautious way the rest of the farm workers eyed her. The memory of Richard stepping in to shield her from harm still made her heart race. At dawn, she took a fortifying breath and got behind the wheel. The drive to the farm felt strangely tranquil, with the early sunlight casting long rays across the fields. Despite the beautiful scenery, a sense of anticipation pressed in on her. She sensed something was bound to happen. As she turned onto the gravel road leading to the main yard, she spotted Richard's familiar silhouette near one of the large greenhouses. He was speaking to a pair of workers who nodded attentively. She waved shyly through the windshield before parking beside a pickup truck loaded with crates. Stepping out, she inhaled the crisp scent of dew-covered leaves and fresh soil. Part of her hoped the foreman wouldn't appear, but she doubted her luck would hold. Richard greeted her with a polite, almost relieved smile. "You're up early," he said, hooking his thumbs into his belt loops. "Everything good at your event?" "Still in prep mode," she admitted, lifting out an empty basket. "I have most of what I need, but I'm short on some leafy greens and maybe a few extra peppers." He gestured toward the greenhouse behind him. "I can help you pick out the best rows. After last night—" His expression darkened slightly. "I just want to make sure there's no more trouble." Bianca smiled in appreciation. "Thank you," she said quietly. "But about last night, are you okay? You seemed really stressed." The corners of his mouth tightened. "I've been putting out fires for weeks now. Let's just say the farm's future depends on certain deals going through, and some people aren't happy about the changes." She wanted to push further, but she could tell he was reluctant to share every detail. Instead, she followed him inside the greenhouse, where rows of lush plants stretched under the glare of artificial lights. The warmth and humidity wrapped around them. Richard moved between the rows with practiced ease, picking out fresh kale and leafy heads of lettuce, tossing them into her basket with careful precision. "Looks like a good harvest," she commented, pressing a palm against a leafy bunch to test its crispness. "You really do know your way around these plants," he let out a soft chuckle. "I've been around them my whole life in one way or another." She caught a hint of pride in his voice and felt another ripple of admiration. It was a side to him she didn't see often, a passionate caretaker of the land. They packed enough greens to fill 2 baskets, chatting about recipe ideas and the best times to harvest certain produce. For a while, it was easy to forget the tension that haunted the farm. But as they stepped back outside, the peace was broken. A furious bellow sounded from across the yard, and Bianca's stomach twisted into a knot. The foreman, tall and scowling, stomped toward them, fists clenched. She slowed her steps, heart pounding, but Richard strode forward, placing himself between her and the oncoming threat. "What now?" Richard asked, his tone low but firm. The foreman spat at the ground. "Ain't you got enough to worry about without cozying up to visitors?" He glared at Bianca. "I warned you, city girl. You keep sticking your nose in our business, you'll regret it." Bianca stiffened, refusing to be cowed. "I'm just here for produce, nothing else." "Oh yeah?" His eyes flashed. "I see you creeping around after hours, and next thing we know, the boss man's up all night dealing with your nonsense." Richard's voice hardened. "That's enough." The foreman turned his scowl on him. "Is it? Word's getting out about your fancy new partnerships. Some of us don't want our farm turning into a circus, and we sure don't need her." He jerked a thumb at Bianca. "Digging up trouble." Bianca's cheeks flared with anger. "I'm not digging up trouble. I'm buying vegetables. If you have a problem, you can talk to me directly." That was all it took to set him off. He lunged forward, shoving a heavy crate out of the way so forcefully that it toppled sideways. Its contents of cucumbers and peppers spilled over the dirt. Richard grabbed Bianca's arm and guided her behind him, stepping in to confront the man. "She said that's enough," Richard snapped, voice rising. "Leave her alone or we'll have bigger problems than spilled produce." But the foreman, eyes wild, swung an arm at Richard. The blow grazed Richard's shoulder, enough to send him stumbling a step back. Bianca's heart lurched at the sight of violence erupting over what felt like petty resentment. Farm workers nearby dropped what they were doing, some yelling, some running forward in alarm. Richard managed to steady himself, and before the foreman could throw another punch, Richard blocked him, gripping his arm firmly. "Stand down," Richard said, each syllable crackling with tension. "You think you can just waltz around, ignoring how things have always been done here?" The foreman growled, struggling against Richard's hold. "You're nothing but an overgrown salesman in boots, handing out deals, changing our ways for some big-shot plan you won't explain." Bianca pressed a hand to her mouth. Everything was happening so fast. The foreman twisted free of Richard's grip and swung again, this time catching Richard square in the chest. Fury surged through her and she shouted for help, but the workers seemed torn. Some hesitated to intervene, uncertain who to side with. In a flash, Richard returned the blow, sending the foreman stumbling backward. A cry of alarm rose from a cluster of onlookers. A few of them rushed in, finally pulling the men apart before another punch landed. Panting, the foreman spat onto the ground again, a hateful glare shooting first at Bianca, then at Richard. "This isn't your farm alone," he snarled, nursing his jaw. "We'll see who's still standing when the dust settles." Two workers dragged him off, muttering about calling security or contacting a supervisor. Bianca stood there, shaken, her breath coming in quick, sharp bursts. She glanced around. Everyone was staring at Richard with uneasy respect, as if they weren't entirely sure how to react to this open confrontation. Richard ran a hand over his face and turned toward her, chest still heaving. "Are you hurt?" he asked, voice thick with concern. She shook her head numbly. "I'm fine. You got hit, though." Her eyes flicked down to the spot where the foreman's punch had landed. "I'll survive," he muttered, adjusting his shirt. Around them, the farm workers slowly returned to their tasks, though the atmosphere remained charged with tension. One older hand caught Bianca's eye and whispered, "You two should be careful." There was sympathy there, but also caution. Richard led her toward the packing area, where she could at least rest her nerves. She gingerly set down the basket of greens. "I never imagined buying lettuce could end like this," she said, trying to force a shaky laugh. He scowled, gazing across the yard in the direction the foreman had been taken. "I'm sorry. I didn't want you involved in any of this." She swallowed hard. But I am involved, whether we like it or not. I care about what's happening here and She hesitated. Heat spread across her cheeks as she admitted, I care about you. His expression softened, despite the tension etched around his eyes. Gently, he cupped her elbow, a protective gesture. I didn't want to pull you into my mess, but everything with the farm has escalated, and there are people who don't want progress. It's okay, she murmured. I want to help if I can, but I need to know what's really going on. Why is the foreman so convinced this isn't your farm to run alone? Richard sighed, a hint of frustration in the rise and fall of his shoulders. It's complicated. The farm's ownership is more entwined than you realize. When I took over certain operations, it upset people who've been here for years. Some adapt, some rebel. Bianca's mind whirred. So he was in charge, but maybe not the sole owner. She recalled overhearing mention of partnerships and big contracts. So it's not just about the produce, it's about changes you're making, and not everyone agrees. He nodded. Exactly. And with new suppliers I'm courting, big money's at stake. I'm not just trying to line my pockets. I want to upgrade the farm's equipment, move to more sustainable practices, make life better for everyone. But if we lose the wrong investors, everything could collapse. People like the foreman think it's safer to stick to the old ways, and they view me as a threat. Her heart sank. Then me poking around probably looked like I was meddling. He traced the edge of a wooden crate with his thumb, eyes flicking toward the area where the scuffle happened. They're suspicious of any outsider. And a newcomer who's close to me? That makes them even more hostile. Bianca remembered the chaos, the harsh words, the fists swinging. She pressed her lips together. Maybe I should... Don't say you should stay away. Richard cut in gently. I don't want you in danger, but I also don't want you to vanish. He exhaled, as if wrestling with conflicting thoughts. Something about you. It keeps me grounded. Warmth flooded her cheeks. Before she could respond, he rested a hand on her shoulder. It was a tender gesture that made her pulse flutter. She found herself leaning into him slightly, his steady presence a balm to her jangled nerves. I can handle this, he murmured. The farm is worth fighting for, but I need to know you're safe. Bianca tipped her head up, meeting his gaze. Richard, I'm willing to stand by you, but... She swallowed. Are you certain you're telling me everything? I can't walk blindly into all this conflict without understanding the full story. He hesitated, lips parting like he might reveal more. But shouts from across the yard interrupted them. Another cluster of workers, seemingly flustered, was calling for Richard's attention. He cast a regretful glance at Bianca and squeezed her hand gently before stepping away. Go ahead, she encouraged softly, though it pained her to watch him leave. She knew his responsibilities wouldn't wait. She occupied herself sorting through the produce, packing leaves into sealed containers. Her hands trembled at first, but the repetitive task helped calm her. Outside, she caught glimpses of Richard talking to the workers, gesturing with urgency. He looked poised and confident, the kind of leadership that came naturally. Yet the tension in his stance was impossible to miss. When he returned, he eyed the disarray of spilled peppers. I'll have someone gather that up. Meanwhile, I'm sorry you had to witness all this. Bianca managed a small nod. Don't be sorry. Just don't keep pushing me away. Their gazes locked, a mix of relief and affection shimmering in his eyes. It was in that moment she realized how deeply she cared, how she couldn't bear the thought of abandoning him to grapple with farm politics alone. As he walked her back to her car, she felt the weight of unspoken confessions pressing down on them. She paused by the driver's side door, heart pounding. Taking a shaky breath, she mustered the courage to ask the question that had been gnawing at her. Richard, she began softly, her voice trembling just enough to betray her nerves. Is there more you're hiding about who really owns this place? He froze, hand still resting on the door handle. A flash of something, Uncertainty, or maybe fear, passed through his eyes. She could almost feel the words catch in his throat. Whatever answer he gave could change everything between them. Bianca's direct question hangs in the air. If he answers truthfully, everything could change forever. Bianca stood beside her car, pulse thrumming as she waited for Richard to answer. The weight of her question, whether he truly owned the farm, hung between them like a storm cloud about to burst. His hand lingered on the doorframe, and she could almost feel the tension vibrating off him. Part of her wanted to take the question back, to pretend everything was simple, but she couldn't go on without knowing the truth. Finally, Richard released a slow breath, eyes flickering with an emotion she couldn't decipher. "Come with me," he said softly. "Let's talk somewhere we won't be interrupted." She nodded, heart in her throat. He led her across the yard, passing rows of vegetables and the greenhouse where they'd gathered leafy greens earlier. They skirted around the main barn, beyond the prying eyes of farmhands busy at their tasks. Eventually, he guided her to a converted office space that looked more like a modest cabin on the outskirts of the property. It was quiet there, the buzz of insects and the distant hum of machinery the only sounds. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of old wood and freshly brewed coffee. A heavy wooden desk stood in one corner, papers and folders strewn across it, while a small couch faced a window overlooking the orchard. Richard closed the door behind them, then motioned for her to sit. Bianca lowered herself onto the couch, hands folded tightly in her lap. Richard remained standing a moment, looking out the window, as though steeling himself. When he finally turned to face her, there was a gravity in his expression she hadn't seen before. "I've been avoiding this conversation," he began, voice hushed. "Not because I wanted to deceive you, but because I liked being seen as just me." He swallowed, walked to the desk, and rested a hand on a stack of documents. "I'm not just an employee here. I own this farm. In fact, I own several farms." Bianca's breath caught. She'd half expected the words, yet hearing them spoken aloud sent a rush of emotions surging through her. "Several?" she managed, her voice a mere whisper. He nodded. "It started with inheritances, my parents, grandparents. Over time, I expanded. I've been acquiring more land, investing in modern equipment. This place is the heart of the operation, but it goes way beyond that. I didn't tell you because, well, people tend to treat me differently once they know I'm not just a friendly hand." Her mind reeled. She thought back to every moment they'd shared, carrying baskets of vegetables, him discussing produce discounts, the carefully guarded tension from the workers. Everything seemed to snap into a sharp new focus. "Why not just say it up front?" she asked, voice tremulous with hurt. "I've been threatened, shoved, even spied on. All along you had the power to stop it, didn't you?" Richard's shoulders slumped. "I'm sorry, truly. I was trying to handle things quietly, manage the conflicts without drawing you into them. But this farm, these farms, are bigger than a single person. I wanted you to see me as me, not as some wealthy owner. And if I'd revealed everything at once, I worried you'd keep your distance or think I was trying to impress you." She studied his face, searching for signs of dishonesty. Instead, she found remorse mixed with a raw sincerity. She couldn't deny the tug of empathy pulling at her heart. "I can understand," she murmured after a pause, "but it still feels like you weren't being honest." He came closer, sinking onto the couch beside her. "I know," he said softly, "and I hate that it looks like betrayal. It's just, the more attached I got to you, the harder it was to confess. I'm juggling deals with major suppliers, big investors, trying to push for more sustainable methods. It's caused friction with old management, especially the foreman who's been here for ages. He and others like him hate that I'm changing things, upgrading machinery, insisting on new contracts, pushing them to adopt eco-friendlier processes." She folded her arms. "So that's why he's so hostile. He thinks you're taking away his sense of control." Richard nodded. He used to be in a position of authority that he thought would last forever. I've been letting him keep certain responsibilities, but he senses his influence slipping. A lot of the workers trust him more than me, and he's been spreading rumors, claiming I'm just a corporate type who doesn't care about the real farming life. Bianca exhaled, processing the flood of information. And the locked buildings? The phone calls about huge investments. This is all part of your plan to modernize? Exactly, he said, voice tinged with excitement. I have advanced agri-tech in that warehouse. Automated irrigation systems, specialized drones for monitoring crops, stuff that could revolutionize how we produce and distribute food. But if word gets out too soon, or if certain investors pull out, the entire expansion could collapse. I've been forced to keep things quiet. Bianca reached for his hand, squeezing lightly. Well, you certainly hit it well, but I see now why you're so stressed. It's a lot to handle. He flashed a grateful, if tired, smile. Yeah, it is. And now you've seen how it can turn hostile in a blink. I'm sorry you got dragged into the fights. Her thoughts drifted to the bruises forming on his shoulder, the memory of him taking a hit to protect her. I'm glad you told me, she said finally, searching his gaze. Even if it was later than I would have liked. At least I know the truth now. He slid an arm gently around her shoulders, a gesture both apologetic and seeking comfort. She let out a slow breath, leaning into the warmth of his side, and felt that swirl of confusion, hurt, and relief settle into something more manageable. They stayed like that for a moment, the silence punctuated only by the distant hum of a tractor outside. Eventually she pulled back, glancing at him earnestly. I'm still worried. The foreman and whoever else opposes you, they're not going to back down quietly. No, he agreed. They won't. But now that I'm not hiding from you, maybe we can face it together. He straightened, as if summoning courage. Tonight, if you're free, I'd like to show you some of the projects in that locked warehouse. Then you'll really understand why this is so important. Bianca's heart thumped. She was torn between fascination at the scale of his undertaking and trepidation about stepping deeper into dangerous territory. Yet her trust in him had grown in spite of everything. She nodded. All right. Show me. A hint of relief flickered in his eyes. Thank you, Bianca. Later that day, they grabbed a quick lunch, sandwiches made with produce fresh from the greenhouse, and she peppered him with questions about his grand vision for the farms. He spoke passionately about implementing solar-powered systems, water recycling, and organic farming methods that would give them an edge in a market saturated with mass-produced goods. Despite the seriousness of the tension, she found herself drawn to the spark in his voice when he talked about sustainability and feeding people healthier food. Once the sun sank low, turning the sky a dusky orange, he led her across the fields to the locked warehouse. A quiet hush fell over the surrounding area. Most of the workers had clocked out, leaving only a few security lights illuminating the wide expanse of farmland. Inside the warehouse, the stark glow of fluorescent lights flickered on to reveal rows of gleaming machinery. Drones, soil sensors, high-tech irrigation setups. Bianca let out a breath in awe, stepping carefully down each aisle of equipment. Richard explained their functions, the ways drones could monitor crop health or how certain devices regulated soil moisture automatically to prevent waste. It's an expensive investment, he admitted, but once we're running at full capacity, these farms will set a new standard. Sustainable, efficient, profitable. That's why the investors are both excited and nervous. Bianca skimmed her fingertips over a sleek drone's metal exterior, imagining how remarkable it would be to see it buzzing over the fields, scanning for pests or dryness. It's amazing. And it makes sense you'd want to keep it under wraps until the deals are secure. His gaze roamed over the machinery, pride mingling with worry in his eyes. The foreman thinks I'm out to replace old-school farmers with robots. He doesn't see how this technology can actually lighten their workload. Some of the old guard just aren't ready for modernization. She nodded slowly. So that's why tensions are high. It's not just ego, it's fear for their livelihoods. He turned, facing her. Exactly. But I know it can work. Once it's all in place, I can show them a future where they don't have to break their backs for the same yield. Bianca's phone buzzed. She recognized Lorena's name on the screen and excused herself to answer. The moment she heard Lorena's voice, she felt the day's tension resurface. "Hey," she said, trying to keep her tone light. "Don't hey me," Lorena teased, though concern laced her voice. "You've been so wrapped up in that farm drama. Are you okay?" Bianca eyed Richard, who was tapping a control panel on one of the machines. "I'm fine. There was a confrontation, but we're sorting things out." Lorena's sigh crackled through the line. "I won't pry too much, but just remember you can always come back to the city. You know, away from all that madness." Bianca glanced at Richard's determined posture and felt a jolt of protectiveness. "I appreciate that, but I'm not bailing on him. There's a lot at stake." "All right," Lorena conceded gently. "Just be careful, please. I'm here if you need me." When Bianca hung up, Richard gave her a questioning look. She tucked her phone away. "My friend's worried," she explained, "but I'm staying by your side." He gave a grateful nod. "I'm glad. Really." They spent more time discussing how to keep the farm safe from sabotage and how Bianca's passion for fresh, sustainable cuisine might integrate into his plans. She'd been saving money to open her own small cafe or catering business. The idea of collaborating with a forward-thinking farm fueled her imagination. The synergy felt almost natural, his technology-driven approach fused with her culinary dreams. By the time they finished, the night sky shimmered with stars. Outside, the cool breeze carried the distant croak of frogs from a nearby pond. Richard locked up the warehouse carefully, turning a quick eye to the shadows, as if half expecting the foreman to appear with more threats. They made their way back to the same cabin office where they'd talked earlier, sharing a simple meal Bianca had brought, grilled vegetables and a fresh salad made from the day's produce. They laughed about the wild ride they'd had so far, her initial visits just looking for groceries, the scuffles, the secrecy. Even though tension still hung in the air, there was a closeness between them now, forged by honesty and the mutual desire to see this farm succeed. In that quiet moment, Bianca realized how deeply her world had shifted in such a short time. She also recognized that neither of them could walk away easily. Too much was at stake: his dream, her heart, and the livelihoods of everyone on these properties. While they cleaned up, Richard admitted there were still problems on the horizon. "Some of the biggest partners are threatening to walk if the farm can't show results soon, and with the foreman causing trouble, it only complicates the timeline. I'm bracing for backlash." Bianca set down the dish she was drying. "We'll face it," she said firmly, surprising even herself with the conviction in her voice. "We'll do it together, right?" He turned to her, eyes reflecting gratitude and a flicker of hope. "Yes," he answered quietly. "Thank you." Much later, after the meal, he walked her outside to her car. The moon was bright, flooding the fields with a gentle glow. She felt the day's fatigue tug at her, yet her mind brimmed with possibilities. As she climbed into the driver's seat, he leaned on the door. "I appreciate you standing by me," he murmured, gently running his thumb across her knuckles. "This place, it means a lot. But you mean more." Her heart fluttered, and she gave his hand a small squeeze. "Just promise me no more secrets?" "No more secrets," he assured, letting go. She started the engine. He stepped back, hands in his pockets, watching her as she prepared to pull away. At that precise moment, his phone blared. Bianca paused, looking at him questioningly. He glanced at the screen, and his face paled as he answered. "What do you mean?" he said into the phone, voice tight. His eyes darted to Bianca, worry etched in his features. "You've got to be joking. All right, stay calm. I'll be right there." He lowered the phone, jaw clenched. The sense of dread emanating from him was palpable. Bianca rolled down the window, her heart thumping. "What happened?" Richard pressed his lips together. "Something big just went wrong at one of the other farms. I have to go handle it. I'll call you, okay?" Bianca nodded, anxiety twisting her gut. As she drove away, she saw him hurrying off with urgent steps, phone already pressed to his ear once more. A chill skittered through her. Problems were piling up, and she feared they might be stepping into territory far more precarious than either of them had imagined. As Bianca prepares to leave that night, an ominous phone call comes in for Richard, and his expression turns grim. Something big has just gone wrong. Bianca's eyes fluttered open at the first hint of daylight, her thoughts already filled with worry over Richard's abrupt departure the night before. He'd called only once in the middle of the night to say the situation at one of his other farms was complicated but under control. Since then, silence. She couldn't blame him. He had so much on his plate, but the uncertainty gnawed at her. She climbed out of bed and stumbled toward the kitchen to brew a cup of tea, feeling drained. Even the familiar rustle of curtains in the morning breeze brought little comfort. Her phone lay on the table, silent except for the occasional news alert. She kept resisting the urge to text him. The last thing he needed was her piling on more stress when he was handling some unknown crisis. By the time she managed to sip her tea, her thoughts drifted to her own problems. Bills had begun to stack up for her small catering business. She'd poured so much energy into perfecting recipes and sourcing the best ingredients from Richard's farms that she hadn't focused enough on marketing or new clients. A mix of frustration and guilt twisted in her stomach. She couldn't place all the blame on the farm drama. She had to face her own shortcomings, too. Still, a pang of longing hit her as she recalled Richard's face, the sincerity in his eyes whenever he talked about sustainable farming. Even in the midst of his troubles, he'd shown such conviction, such passion. It made her chest tighten with worry that she might lose him if things spiraled too far out of control. Determined to stay busy, she ran through the day's plan. She had small catering orders to fulfill, a few follow-up calls with potential clients, and later she'd swing by the farm, assuming Richard was back. She couldn't bear the idea of him dealing with everything alone. Morning blurred into early afternoon. Her phone remained stubbornly quiet. After handing off her completed catering orders, Bianca packed a few containers of leftover dishes, hoping she might share a meal with Richard if he'd returned. She drove toward the farm in a haze of questions, half her mind on finances, half on the precarious situation he faced. When she arrived, a tense energy seemed to cling to the place. Workers were scattered in small groups, talking in low voices, glancing her way with wary expressions. She parked near the main office building, stepping out onto packed dirt that felt harder than usual under the midday sun. Somewhere to her left, she heard the low rumble of a tractor, but she didn't see Richard anywhere. Just as she was about to head inside the office, a female worker approached her, wiping sweat from her brow with a bandana. "You looking for the boss?" she asked in a hushed tone. Bianca nodded. "Yes. Have you seen him?" "He's back in one of the storage units. Huge arguments going on." The woman cast a nervous glance over her shoulder. "I'd be careful if I were you." "Thank you," Bianca said, her heart pounding as she started toward the storage area. She hadn't forgotten how quickly tempers could flare here. The thought of another fight made her clench her fists with worry. Sure enough, as she rounded a corner, she spotted Richard standing in front of a metal-sided building, locked in heated conversation with a broad-shouldered man she didn't recognize. There was no sign of the foreman, but this stranger looked every bit as hostile. He wore a crisp polo, arms crossed over his chest, exuding the unmistakable air of someone who believed he was in control. Bianca lingered behind a stack of crates, listening. "If we lose your contract," the man said, "my associates will pull out entirely, Richard. This isn't negotiable." Richard's voice sounded strained, but firm. "I've been managing expansions carefully. We had a setback at one of the other properties, but it's under control now. We can still meet the timeline." The man let out a disbelieving huff. "Your foreman here is stirring up trouble. My partners see this as instability. We don't invest in chaos." Chaos was right. Bianca's heart twisted at the brusque summary. She saw Richard's frustration clearly in his clenched jaw. It was a reminder that while her own finances troubled her, Richard was juggling something far more colossal. Summoning courage, she stepped forward, clearing her throat. Richard glanced over, relief flickering across his features. The other man's face tightened, impatient at the interruption. "I'm sorry," Bianca murmured, offering a polite nod to the stranger. "I didn't mean to interrupt." Richard, as though taking the chance to breathe, gestured for her to stand by his side. "It's okay," he told her softly. Then he faced the man again, exuding a renewed edge of resolve. "I'm not going to let one disgruntled staff member jeopardize our entire project. Give me a little more time. I'll put measures in place to ensure stability." The man's gaze swept between Bianca and Richard. Finally, he grunted. "I'll talk to my associates again, but no promises. This can't drag on much longer." Without another word, he stalked off toward a shiny black SUV. Bianca and Richard watched him leave, tension radiating from both of them. Once he was gone, Richard let out a breath, raking a hand through his hair. She noticed the exhaustion etched in the lines around his eyes, the slight slump in his shoulders. "That was the supplier, right?" she asked quietly. "One of the big investors?" He nodded grimly. "Yes. They're freaked out because the trouble at the other farm cost us a full shipment. That, combined with the foreman's antics, is making the whole operation look shaky." He paused, voice tightening. "If they pull out, it'll set everything back, maybe even bankrupt a few of these expansions." Bianca reached for his arm. "I'm sorry. I wish there was more I could do." He squeezed her hand. "Just knowing you're here helps. But how about you? I heard about your catering. Everything okay on your side?" She tried to muster a reassuring smile. "It's okay. A bit slow. I'm dealing with some bills that are overdue and I need new customers. But I'll manage." His expression softened with genuine concern. "If money's tight, I could—" "No," she cut in gently, placing a finger against his lips before he could offer financial assistance. "I appreciate it, but I'd prefer to handle my own business. I don't want it to seem like I'm relying on you for everything." He nodded, understanding, though she saw a flash of worry in his eyes. "Well, at least let me help in some way," he insisted. "I can introduce you to local restaurant owners who might benefit from your catering. They respect me around here, even if some are upset by the changes. And your food speaks for itself." Bianca's shoulders relaxed a fraction. "I'd like that. Thank you." They walked toward a quieter section of the property where orchard trees offered shade. The moment they entered the dappled light, she felt the gnawing stress recede slightly. The late summer scent of ripe peaches and warm earth filled the air. She could almost pretend for a breath that everything was simpler. "Mind telling me what happened with the other farm?" she asked. He sighed, stopping near a wooden railing that overlooked rows of fruit trees. It was sabotage, most likely. Someone tampered with irrigation lines, crops withered in certain sections, and we lost thousands of dollars worth of produce. We're investigating, but we have no proof yet, and the workers there are panicking. They need their jobs secure. Her stomach sank. "The foreman?" Richard shook his head. "Unclear. Could be him, or someone he's in league with. Or maybe a local competitor who doesn't like the expansions. I'm juggling so many angles, it's ridiculous." Bianca squeezed his hand again, a silent show of support. He looked down at their entwined fingers, eyes softening momentarily from the weight of responsibility. Then, as if recalling something, he gently drew her closer. "I'm sorry if we haven't spent enough time together lately," he murmured. "You deserve better, and I keep pulling you into these messes." She rested her head against his shoulder. "I chose to be here, and I'm not going anywhere." For a while they stood quietly beneath the trees, letting the breeze cool their heated worries. A sense of closeness enveloped them, fragile yet comforting. Eventually, the faint rumble of machinery reminded them that life on the farm never truly paused. Bianca pulled away, feeling a sudden wave of lightheadedness. The sun was strong and she hadn't had much to eat. "I might need to sit," she mumbled, pressing a hand to her temple. Richard quickly guided her to a bench nearby, concern etched in his face. "Are you okay? You don't look well." She steadied herself, blinking away a swirl of dizziness. "I'm probably just tired, and I skipped lunch." He sat beside her, arms around her shoulders. "Promise me you'll take care of yourself. I can't handle the thought of something happening to you on top of all this." Bianca nodded, trying to dismiss the faint nausea coiling in her stomach. "It's just stress," she told herself. Yet a small voice in the back of her mind whispered otherwise. She recalled waking up the past few mornings with an odd sense of queasiness, though she'd brushed it aside. Stress can do that, she reasoned, but the voice refused to quiet. "Let's go for a quick walk," she said, forcing a smile. "Maybe that'll help me clear my head." They wandered through the orchard, chatting about small things, favorite childhood memories, the best ways to cook peaches. Bianca's headache eased, replaced by a mellow warmth in her chest as she listened to him describe the orchard's history. He pointed out the older trees planted by his grandparents, the newer ones he'd introduced with experimental grafting. It was clear how deeply he cherished this land. Still, every so often, Bianca's mind nagged her with reminders of her own life. The stack of overdue invoices, the emptiness she sometimes felt when she realized how precarious her future was. Now, on top of it all, the hints of nausea kept creeping up at odd moments. She decided she'd pick up a test, just to rule out the wild possibility swirling in her head. It was probably nothing, but the mere thought of it both thrilled and terrified her. As they made their way back to the main yard, a different farmhand approached Richard with urgent questions about scheduling. This left Bianca free to wander by herself for a moment, weaving between crates stacked with bright red tomatoes and glossy green cucumbers. She paused to admire the produce, the heart of the farm's business, and wondered how something so pure and life-giving could be caught in such a maelstrom of tension and sabotage. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed movement. A figure in a baseball cap lingered near the edge of a storage shed, watching her. She froze, unease crawling up her spine, but the person quickly vanished behind the building. Her pulse skipped. She couldn't shake the feeling that the farm was riddled with watchers and hidden motives. She forced herself to keep walking, though her heart pounded. Catching sight of Richard finishing his conversation, she headed over to him. He gave her a guarded smile, then slipped an arm around her waist, guiding her toward the entrance of the old barn. There they found a moment's respite from the sun beneath the wide doors. Shadows climbed the wooden walls, giving them a bit of privacy. "Things won't always be this hectic," he promised quietly. "If we can just get through this rocky patch, secure the deals, and prove our stability, I'll have more time to focus on, well, us." Bianca chewed the inside of her cheek. "I know. I'm just worried for you, for the farms, for everything." She hesitated, a flicker of doubt crossing her mind. Should she tell him now about her suspicions? The last thing she wanted was to burden him with another surprise if it turned out to be a false alarm. He pressed a tender kiss to her forehead, easing the tension in her brow. "Let's go get some water and rest," he said, leading her toward a small break area near the greenhouse. They shared a brief meal of fresh fruit and cold drinks. A sense of camaraderie wrapped around them, reminding her why she'd fallen for him so quickly. His unwavering drive to nurture the land, his gentle concern for her well-being, the earnestness in every word he spoke. Even so, her swirling anxiety made it hard to savor the moment. Late afternoon light stretched across the fields, painting everything in soft gold. Bianca gathered her bag, mentally running through what she still had to do for her catering business. She felt a flutter of gratitude when Richard offered to connect her with local contacts, though part of her still insisted on forging her own path. It was a delicate balance, accepting help while maintaining her independence. Before leaving, she lingered in his arms one last time, inhaling the warm scent of earth and fresh produce that seemed to cling to him. He brushed back a strand of her hair, smiling gently. "Call me when you get home safe, all right?" She nodded, forcing a brave face. "I will." Driving away, she cast one last glance in the rearview mirror. He stood at the edge of the driveway, hands tucked in his pockets, looking as though he carried the weight of the entire farm on his shoulders. A storm of emotions whirled inside her: protectiveness, fear, affection, and a new, deeper tension she hadn't faced until now. Only once she arrived home did she finally let herself linger on her persistent exhaustion and those nagging waves of nausea. Alone in her quiet apartment, she looked at the calendar pinned to her wall, noticing her cycle dates. Her stomach twisted. It wasn't impossible. With everything happening, she hadn't kept track. Swallowing hard, she realized she might be facing a life-altering possibility at the worst, or maybe best, time imaginable. Bianca's hand drifts to her abdomen, suddenly fearful and excited. Could she really be pregnant? And how would that change everything? Bianca woke with a jolt, heart pounding against her ribcage. She dreamed of the farm again, of Richard working in the fields, yet too distant to reach. The image faded as she blinked into the early morning light filtering through the thin curtains of her bedroom. She pressed a shaky hand against her abdomen, recalling the flutter of nausea and dizziness that had haunted her for days. There was no more avoiding it. She'd managed to grab a home pregnancy test the night before, not wanting to jump to conclusions without proof. For a moment, her courage faltered. What if this changed everything? What if it complicated her relationship with Richard at the worst possible time? After a breath, she forced herself out of bed, heading to the bathroom with the test kit in hand. Minutes felt like hours as she waited for the result to appear. When it did, her breath caught in her throat, a small plus sign, unmistakably clear. She sank onto the edge of the bathtub, mind reeling. Pregnant. Every fear and hope tumbled through her. Joy and terror, love and uncertainty. Did she even know how to be a mother? And how on earth would Richard react, tied up as he was in a mountain of farm crises? She needed to talk to him, yet her phone showed no new messages. He'd warned her he might be busy dealing with urgent matters at his other properties. Still, the silence gnawed at her. Determined, she decided to find him in person. There was no time to waste on second-guessing. Even if all of his business turmoil swirled around them, he had a right to know. After a quick shower and a bite of toast she could barely stomach, Bianca set off toward the farm's main administrative headquarters. Unlike the idyllic rows of vegetables and orchards she knew well, this building was a more polished structure on the far side of the estate, where contracts were signed, budgets discussed, and big decisions made. She drove in uneasy silence, replaying the potential conversation in her mind, trying to plan what to say. But no matter how she rehearsed it, the words felt blunt and terrifying. "Richard, I'm pregnant." By the time she arrived, a new wave of nausea threatened her composure. A few official-looking vehicles were parked out front, sleek cars that contrasted sharply with the dusty pickups and tractors she'd grown used to seeing. She could only guess these belonged to wealthy partners or perhaps lawyers. Bianca mustered her courage and headed inside. The lobby, tiled in polished stone, felt worlds apart from the farm dirt and sun. Rows of framed photos adorned the walls. Farmland vistas, award ceremonies for agricultural achievements, pictures of Richard's father and grandfather shaking hands with local authorities. She paused before one photo of a stern-faced older man, Richard's grandfather, if she recalled correctly, beneath a plaque honoring decades of farming innovation. A quiver of nerves ran through her. She was stepping into the heart of his family legacy. A sharp voice cut through the hush. "May I help you?" Bianca turned to see a woman in a fitted blazer behind a reception desk, eyebrows raised. "I'm here to see Richard," Bianca said, her voice steadier than she felt. "It's important." The receptionist flicked her gaze over Bianca's casual clothing. "He's in a meeting at the moment. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but then I'm afraid you'll have to wait. May I take your name?" Bianca's cheeks warmed. "My name is Bianca. He's expecting me." That wasn't strictly true, but she wasn't going to be brushed off. The woman tapped on her keyboard, lines deepening in her brow. "I don't see any scheduled appointments under that name." Bianca opened her mouth to protest, but before she could, a door to the side swung open and a tall figure emerged. A distinguished-looking man in a tailored suit who bore a faint resemblance to Richard. He possessed the same deep-set eyes, though they were colder, more calculating. He paused upon seeing Bianca, eyes narrowing. "Who's this?" he demanded of the receptionist. "She says she's here for Richard," the woman replied, sounding faintly apologetic. The suited man studied Bianca, then curled his lip with poorly veiled contempt. "I'll speak with her." The receptionist inclined her head, and the man beckoned Bianca down a corridor before she could protest. She followed, nerves twisting. Was he a family member? One of the investors? She couldn't tell. He led her into a conference room, shutting the door firmly behind them. The space was large, windows spanning one side, giving a view of distant orchards. A sleek glass table dominated the center, littered with folders and laptops. Bianca recognized the corporate atmosphere from her short stints catering business events, though this felt more personal, more unnerving. "Sit," the man ordered. She hesitated but obeyed, settling into a stiff-backed chair. He took a seat across from her, straightening his cufflinks with deliberate precision. "I'm Richard's uncle. Call me Andrew." His voice carried the same crisp edge as his attire. "Now, can I ask what exactly you're doing here?" Bianca fought the urge to shrink. "I came to see Richard. She paused, uncertain how much to reveal. "We have something important to discuss." Andrew's jaw tightened. "Listen carefully. Richard has been under tremendous pressure these last few weeks, as I'm sure you're aware. The last thing he needs is more distractions." Her heart pounded. "I'm not just a distraction," she said, trying to keep her tone calm. I care about him, and something serious has come up that he should know about." Andrew's lips curved into a mirthless smile. "You care about him, do you? How touching." He let out a small, scornful laugh. "Let me guess. You're another wide-eyed dreamer who sees an opportunity in our family's fortune. Thought you'd cozy up to him, maybe spin a sob story or two? I've seen this act before." Bianca's face heated with anger. "That's not true. I didn't even know who he really was at first." Andrew shrugged. "Yet here you are, chasing him to the administrative headquarters. I suppose you'll say you love him next." He raised a dismissive hand before she could respond. "My nephew's generosity has led him down some misguided paths. This entire fiasco with modernizing the farms has put the family on edge, and now you show up, unannounced, with urgent news only he can hear?" Her stomach rolled, a flash of nausea mixing with outrage. "Please," she said, forcing her voice steady, "I'm not after money. I'm not here for your fortune. I came because—" Andrew held up a hand, cutting her off. "Richard is in a meeting that could decide whether our entire agricultural network survives this quarter. I'm not about to interrupt him because some random girl claims to have pressing news." He leaned forward, eyes glinting. "So if you want to preserve any dignity, I suggest you leave now." Bianca's pulse hammered so loudly she feared it might echo in the silent room. "I'm not a random girl," she managed, voice wavering with emotion. "Richard and I—" Yes, Andrew drawled, rolling his eyes. "A budding romance. But from what I've seen, your presence is only making matters worse. Did you know the foreman's fiasco started right when you began popping by?" Staff are saying you've been snooping around after hours, stirring up trouble." "That's not fair," Bianca burst out. "I was only there for fresh produce at first. Then yes, I got entangled in the problems, but that's not my fault. Fault or not, it's an inconvenience," Andrew snapped. "The family can't afford more chaos. If you truly care for my nephew, you'll do him a favor. Vanish." Tears burned in Bianca's eyes, but she blinked them back. She wanted to shout that she was pregnant, that Andrew had no right to dismiss her. But something about the man's icy demeanor warned her he wouldn't listen. He might even turn it against her, use it as more proof that she was after money. "I just need 5 minutes with Richard," she pleaded. "He has a right to know something important." Andrew stood, smoothing imaginary wrinkles from his suit jacket. "For your own good," he said, voice chillingly soft. "Turn around, walk out, and forget this place. Any further attempts to intrude, and we'll have security involved. Do you understand?" Bianca opened her mouth to protest, but he moved swiftly, opening the door and nodding to the receptionist who had followed them. With surprising force, the woman took Bianca's arm and guided her down the corridor. She tried to resist, to plant her feet. "Wait, please," she called, her voice echoing around the sleek lobby. "Just let me talk to him." No one listened. She was ushered to the entrance, and by the time she blinked in the harsh sunlight, she realized she'd been firmly thrown out. She stood on the building's steps, stomach churning with indignation and heartbreak. Could Richard truly be too busy to spare even a moment? Or had his uncle lied? Either way, the message was clear. The family wanted her gone. Tears welled in her eyes as she stumbled toward her car. Her hand shook so badly she could barely fit the key in the door. Finally, she managed to collapse into the driver's seat, the intensity of the last few minutes hitting her like a wave. Andrew's sneer still echoed in her mind, accusations that she was an opportunist, a meddler. She felt humiliated, furious, and, more than anything, desperately alone. Her thoughts turned to the tiny life she suspected was growing inside her. How was she supposed to handle this alone if Richard's family already branded her a threat? She cradled her abdomen, fear blossoming at the reality that she might have to raise a child without the man she loved, without any support from his side. A few passers-by shot curious glances as she leaned on the steering wheel, breathing raggedly. She tried calling Richard's number, but it went straight to voicemail. His text responses were still non-existent. And now, with the mention of security if she returned, it was clear they'd do everything to keep her away. Tears broke free then, rolling down her cheeks as she started the engine. The idea of driving home felt daunting, but there was no point in staying. Andrew had humiliated her beyond bearing, and Richard, wherever he was, wasn't there to defend her. She felt abruptly like a nuisance, an outsider, a problem to be swept aside. She pulled onto the main road, tears blurring her vision. In her mind, she saw the orchard where she and Richard had laughed together, the greenhouse where he'd picked out vegetables for her, the gentle way he'd confessed his real identity. All those tender memories felt tainted by the harsh reality of his family's disapproval. Fear churned in her gut. Was this love even possible now? Bianca drove aimlessly for a while before forcing herself to head toward home. Hot tears stung her eyes, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. She ached to call Lorena or someone who might comfort her, but she couldn't form the words to explain the heartbreak and panic churning inside. The future she'd glimpsed with Richard suddenly felt impossible, overshadowed by wealth, legacy, and a family determined to keep her at bay. By the time she parked outside her apartment, a dull exhaustion had settled over her. She was trembling, the stress of the confrontation and her ever-present secret pressing in on her like a vice. She barely made it inside before sinking to the floor, tears streaking her cheeks, mind racing with all the questions she had no answers to. Bianca flees the place, crying, believing that perhaps there's no going back for this relationship. Everything seems lost. Bianca spent the better part of 2 days holed up in her apartment, nursing a bruised heart and an even more uncertain future. Every time her phone rang, she tensed, hoping to see Richard's name. When it wasn't him, usually just a telemarketer or a text reminder about groceries, her chest constricted painfully. She tried to tell herself she should move on, that his family's hostility was a clear sign she didn't belong in his world. But each time she looked at the positive pregnancy test hidden in her nightstand, she felt a surge of fierce protectiveness for the baby growing inside her. No matter what, she had to tell him. On the third morning, a text finally arrived. "I'm back in town. Can we talk? I miss you." The message was simple, but her heart lifted for the first time in days. She didn't respond immediately. Her emotions seesawed between relief and lingering hurt. Memories of his uncle's cutting words and the forceful way she'd been thrown out of the administrative building resurfaced. Still, she found herself typing back, "Where are you? I need to see you too." Richard's reply came swiftly with an address. The administrative office. The same place that had felt so cold and unwelcoming. Bianca took a steadying breath, deciding she would face whatever was waiting there. She couldn't let fear or pride stop her from doing what was necessary. Even if his uncle was lurking, she deserved at least a moment alone with Richard. If his family tried to intervene again, she was prepared to stand her ground, or walk away forever. By the time she reached the sleek lobby, her nerves were taut. The same receptionist who had scorned her before recognized her and tensed, but Bianca wasted no time. "Richard's expecting me," she said, voice firm. Without waiting for permission, she walked past the desk, spotting a familiar corridor leading to the conference rooms. It was there, near a wide set of double doors, that she found him. Richard was scrolling through documents on a tablet, brow creased in concentration. The moment he saw her, relief softened his features, and he crossed the distance in swift strides. "I was worried," he murmured, placing a gentle hand on her arm. "I heard you came by, but my uncle stopped me," she finished, her voice thick with emotion. "He practically threw me out. I tried to call, but you were busy with your crisis. I didn't know what else to do." A shadow flickered in his eyes. "I'm sorry. I swear I would have come running if I'd known. Things have been complicated." She looked down, hands clasped together to keep them from trembling. "I understand that you've been under pressure, but I can't be kept on the sidelines anymore. I have something to tell you." Before she could continue, the double doors swung open and Andrew stepped into the hallway, flanked by two men in suits who appeared to be colleagues or business partners. He froze upon spotting her, and his expression hardened. "Bianca," he said coolly, "visiting again?" Richard's gaze narrowed. "Andrew, step aside. We need to talk, privately." Andrew's mouth curved into a bitter smile. "Your timing is terrible. We're in the middle of renegotiating with suppliers, and I see you've brought your friend." Bianca bristled, recalling how he'd insulted her before, but she held her tongue. She wasn't here for a public fight. All she wanted was 5 minutes alone with Richard. Yet Andrew was already gesturing for his colleagues to observe the situation, as though Bianca were some unwelcome curiosity. Richard raised his chin, tension carving lines into his jaw. "Give me a few minutes. That's all I ask." Andrew snorted. "We're on the brink of sealing a deal to keep this farm afloat. Don't you think that's more important than whatever she needs to say?" He glanced at Bianca, and the disdain in his eyes made her stomach clench. "Or are your priorities out of order again?" Richard opened his mouth to protest, but from behind Andrew, one of the suited men spoke up. "We've heard enough about these disruptions, Richard. Word around the farm is that you've been distracted by personal matters. We need your full attention, or our partnership is off the table." A wave of frustration rippled through Bianca. Couldn't they see how unfair it was to hold Richard's personal life against him, especially when he was the one stabilizing the farm? She drew a breath, determined to keep calm. "I won't be long," she said quietly, meeting Richard's eyes. "Just a moment in private." Her voice trembled on that last word, praying he'd understand how much she needed this. Andrew crossed his arms, a muscle working in his jaw. "Fine," he snapped. "But keep it brief. We're waiting in the conference room." With that, he spun on his heel, the other men trailing after him, and the doors thumped shut behind them. Richard led Bianca a few steps away, into a smaller adjoining office. A large window overlooked the estate grounds where neat rows of fruit trees shimmered in the midday sun. The contrast between the natural beauty outside and the sterile tension inside felt almost cruel. He closed the door softly and turned to face her. "Please don't think I've been ignoring you," he said, voice low. "I only found out you'd come after the fact. Andrew, he's been overstepping. I'm trying to keep the family calm, keep the deals from falling apart, while also figuring out how to handle the sabotage at the other farms." He stopped, raking a hand through his hair. "I'm so sorry, Bianca." Her vision blurred with sudden tears. For days, she'd fought to stay strong, but the emotions were too raw now. "I know you're doing your best. I never doubted that. But I'm caught in the middle of your family's fight, and I can't just disappear. She took a shaky breath, summoning the words she'd rehearsed so many times in her mind. "Richard, I'm pregnant." For a heartbeat, he didn't react. Then his eyes widened, and he let out a stunned breath. "You're sure?" She nodded, tears spilling over her cheeks. "I took a few tests, all positive." A wave of emotions flickered across his face. Disbelief, awe, then a flicker of pure joy that warmed his gaze, followed by dawning worry. He reached out, hesitantly placing a hand on her stomach, though it was too early for any visible sign of her condition. I don't know what to say," he whispered. "I'm happy, I swear I am. But my family, this farm, everything is spiraling. I want to protect you, protect our baby, but—" She placed a trembling hand over his. "I was terrified to tell you. I thought you might see it as another burden, but I can't keep it a secret." His arms came around her in a tight embrace, and for an instant, she felt a sense of calm she hadn't known in weeks. "You're not a burden," he murmured against her hair. "Never. This changes everything, but I won't let you face it alone." A sound from the hallway made them both tense. Angry voices trickled through the door, and Richard pulled back, exhaling. "They're waiting. I have to deal with this now, but I promise we'll figure this out together." Bianca swallowed a fresh wave of anxiety. "We should tell your family, right? Or at least explain—" "No," he said firmly, regret shading his eyes. "Not here, not like this. They'll think it's a ploy to lock down the inheritance or sabotage the negotiations. Andrew especially will twist it into something ugly. Let me handle them first, then we'll sit down and talk about everything." She bit her lip, recalling Andrew's menacing words that she should vanish. The idea of revealing the pregnancy to him now felt like stepping onto a battlefield. "Okay," she conceded softly, though fear churned in her stomach. Richard brushed a tear from her cheek. "Stay here, or better yet, go back to the orchard and wait for me. Once this meeting is over, I'll find you. We can talk properly, away from prying eyes." Before she could respond, the door swung open with a loud thud. Andrew stood there, arms crossed, posture rigid. Two other family members, perhaps distant cousins, Bianca guessed, loomed behind him. There was no denying the tension in the air. "What's going on?" Andrew demanded, voice cutting. "We have urgent matters to settle, Richard. If you keep stalling, we'll lose these partners entirely." Richard squared his shoulders. "I'm coming, but keep this private. Bianca's with me." Andrew's gaze flicked between them, suspicion burning in his eyes. "Oh, we're all aware she's with you," he sneered. "And if she's bringing more drama, we're going to have a serious problem." One of the other relatives, a stout man in a tailored suit, shoved forward, voice rough. "We're done waiting while you play house. This meeting is for people who actually have a stake in the business." Bianca's anger flared. Before she could bite back, Richard raised a hand. "Enough," he said in a dangerously calm tone. "I'll be in the meeting in 1 minute. Go." Andrew hesitated, eyes narrowing, then spun on his heel. The two men trailed behind him, letting the door slam shut again. In the tense silence that followed, Richard let out a frustrated growl. "They're on a rampage," he muttered. "All this stress has them convinced I'm too distracted to lead." Bianca reached for his hand. "I won't add to your problems. If you want me to go—" "No," he said quickly, his grip firm. "But maybe stay nearby. Don't let Andrew corner you alone. I'll wrap up this meeting and come straight back to you." She nodded, heart pounding. He offered a comforting squeeze of her fingers before leaving, shoulders squared in determination. Within seconds, she was alone in the small office, the muffled sounds of voices in the next room drifting through the wall. She tried to steady her breathing, mentally replaying the moment she told him about the pregnancy. He'd sounded relieved, even happy beneath the worry. That gave her a spark of hope. They could face whatever chaos came next. If only his family weren't so hostile. Moments later, the voices beyond the door escalated, turning into angry shouts. Concern flooded her, and she pressed her ear to the wood. She couldn't make out exact words, but she recognized Richard's calm but firm tone, punctuated by Andrew's bitter retorts. Then something crashed, a loud thump, followed by a cry of alarm. Bianca's heart lurched. Without thinking, she flung the door open and rushed into the corridor. The conference doors stood ajar. Inside, chaos reigned. One of the men had upended a chair, and Andrew was pointing an accusatory finger at Richard. Tension crackled like a live wire, and she saw Richard taking a threatening step forward, fists clenched. Another relative, an older woman, stepped in to hold him back. "You want to ruin everything for your own whims? You're going to lose us the entire empire," Andrew bellowed. Richard fired back. "I'm trying to save the farms, not let them stagnate under outdated methods. If you can't see that—" Andrew suddenly lunged, shoving a shoulder into Richard's chest. Richard staggered, nearly colliding with a table. Bianca gasped, rushing in, but Andrew rounded on her in the same motion. "This is your fault, isn't it?" he snarled, eyes wild with anger. "Showing up here again, distracting him." "Stop it!" Bianca cried, pulse hammering. "You have no right—" Andrew advanced, like he might push her too, and Richard roared with protective fury, jerking him backward. Chairs toppled as people scrambled. An uproar of shouts and curses filled the air. Bianca's world narrowed to the swirl of aggression, the threat of someone actually getting hurt. "Calm down," someone else shouted. "Let's settle this like adults." But Bianca could barely hear them. She stood rooted, heart pounding, fear spiking. This wasn't a family business meeting. This was a battleground. She caught Richard's eyes, saw the desperation there, and it tore at her heart. Everything was unraveling. In a split-second decision, she backed away. Her mind screamed that if she stayed, she'd only fan the flames. Richard was already at odds with his family, and the sight of her incensed them further. She spun, stumbling past the hallway toward the exit, tears burning her eyes. She needed air, space. She needed to think. The baby couldn't endure this madness. "Bianca!" Richard's voice echoed behind her as she pushed through the doors into the lobby. The receptionist stared, wide-eyed, but Bianca hardly noticed, storming out into the bright midday sun, tears streaking her face. She heard Richard calling her name again, closer now, but she couldn't stop, not when every breath felt like fire in her lungs. She bolted into the parking lot, fumbling with her keys. Part of her yearned for him to catch up, to pull her into his arms and promise it would be okay. But the chaos inside that building rattled her to the core. His family blamed her for everything, and now they were physically coming to blows. How could they ever find peace in such a hostile environment? Her engine roared to life, and she sped out of the lot, breath coming in ragged gasps. In the rearview mirror, she glimpsed Richard running after her, calling her name. But she was already too far gone, tears blurring her vision as she disappeared down the street. Richard tries to follow her out the door, calling her name, but she's already gone, leaving him torn between standing up to his family or losing the woman who carries his child. Bianca stared at the printout from the clinic, her head spinning. She'd come in expecting to hear she was carrying one baby, a life-altering revelation by itself. But the doctor's kind eyes and the words that followed had shattered every assumption she'd clung to. 3 tiny hearts beat inside her. Triplets. Now, sitting in the quiet exam room, she struggled to absorb the gravity of it. Her hands trembled, tears threatening to spill as she pressed her palm over her flat stomach. Triplets, she echoed softly, the syllables feeling foreign on her tongue. The obstetrician offered a gentle smile. It's early yet, but yes, all signs confirm it. You'll need frequent checkups. High-risk pregnancies demand extra care, especially with 3. Bianca could only nod. She cradled the ultrasound images, tears blurring the black and white shapes that were her children. She couldn't stop thinking of Richard's face when she'd told him she was pregnant, how stunned and hopeful he'd looked despite the chaos swirling around him. They hadn't even scratched the surface of what a single baby would mean, and now this. The idea of 3 little lives growing inside her filled her with both fierce love and crushing fear. The nurse guided her through scheduling future appointments, handing her pamphlets about nutrition and prenatal vitamins. Bianca took them mechanically, mind buzzing. Once she finally stepped out into the late afternoon sunshine, the warmth felt unreal against her skin. She found herself moving almost on autopilot to her car, easing into the driver's seat with limbs that felt made of lead. As soon as she locked the door, her composure broke. She wept quietly, resting her forehead against the steering wheel, tears wetting her cheeks. This changed everything. Her entire life, Richard's life, the swirling drama with his family. She didn't even know if she had a place in that family anymore, especially after the vicious way they'd tried to drive her away. Yet here she was, carrying their future heirs, in a sense. Triplets. Her phone buzzed. She fumbled for it, hoping it might be Richard. Instead, Lorena's name flashed on the screen. Bianca wiped her cheeks and answered, voice shaky. "Hey, Bianca, finally! I've been trying to reach you for hours. Are you okay?" She swallowed hard. The question waited. "Not exactly," she said, forcing a watery laugh. "I'm at the clinic. I found out I'm pregnant with triplets." Silence stretched on Lorena's end, followed by a stunned, "Triplets? As in 3 babies?" A wave of fresh tears threatened as Bianca confirmed it. Lorena bombarded her with questions. Was she in pain? Did she have enough support? Would Richard be there for her? Each inquiry made Bianca's chest tighten. "I haven't told him yet," she admitted softly. "I didn't know. I only just found out myself." "That's huge," Lorena breathed. "Oh, sweetie, I'm so excited for you, but also worried. This is a lot to handle. Have you thought about what you're going to do?" "I don't know," Bianca said, frustration and fear coloring her voice. "Richard's family practically threw me out last time. They don't want me near him, and I can't even blame them for seeing me as trouble. Ever since I showed up, everything spiraled out of control." Lorena's voice turned firm. "You are not the cause of their problems. They have decades of drama built up, and you just got caught in the crossfire. Doesn't Richard have a right to know about the triplets no matter what his family thinks?" "Yes, of course he does," Bianca said. "But I tried to talk to him. I tried to approach his family. His uncle threatened me, practically called security to keep me away." She squeezed her eyes shut, recalling Andrew's cold glare and demeaning tone. "I can't force myself into that environment again if it's going to hurt the babies. Or me." Lorena exhaled. "Take some time. Let me know if you need anything. I can come by tonight, or you can crash at my place if you want. You shouldn't be alone right now." Bianca managed a small, grateful smile. "Thank you. Really, you're a lifesaver. Let's talk later tonight? I need to clear my head." They hung up, and Bianca sat there for a long moment, the ultrasound pictures resting on the passenger seat. She traced the faint outlines of tiny forms, each one representing an unexpected miracle. Her life felt suddenly too big to handle. She turned on the ignition, deciding to head back to her apartment for some quiet time to process. Yet as she left the clinic parking lot, a gnawing sense of isolation lodged in her chest. Back home, she tried to distract herself with tidying. She folded laundry, rearranged her kitchen, and prepped a few simple meals for the next day's catering orders. But the normalcy only highlighted the massive shift her future had just taken. Every clink of a plate echoed the thought, triplets, triplets, triplets. Eventually, she collapsed onto the couch, tears threatening again. A chime broke through her anxious haze. Someone was at the door. Heart lurching, she jumped up, nearly hoping it was Richard. Maybe he'd come to find her. But when she opened the door, an envelope lay on her doormat. No one in sight. She picked it up warily, noticing no return address. Once inside, she tore the envelope open, revealing a single piece of paper. Its typed message was brief and cutting. "Name your price and leave him for good." Her stomach twisted in revulsion. There was no signature, but the meaning was clear. Another threat from someone in Richard's circle, possibly a lawyer, an extended family member, or just one of the staff who resented her. The subtext was obvious. They thought she was after money. They wanted her to vanish. Bianca's anger rose, so fierce it surprised her. She tossed the letter onto the coffee table and paced the room, her mind whirling. This was her child, children too, not just some transaction. Why did these people think she'd abandon the father of her babies for a payoff? Or maybe that's exactly the scenario they were used to, people exploiting the family's wealth. She felt her cheeks burning with indignation, but that anger swiftly morphed into despair. If Richard's circle was so determined to bully her, how could she ever feel safe? Hands shaking, she grabbed her phone and dialed Richard's number. Straight to voicemail, again. She left no message. If he was locked in crisis meetings or traveling to another sabotaged property, there was no telling when he'd see her missed call. The rational part of her mind reminded her he was juggling an empire on the brink, but the emotional part wanted to scream, he should answer, no matter what. Hours slipped by in a restless blur. Evening shadows stretched across her apartment walls. She couldn't shake an instinctive fear that each day she waited was one day closer to losing him entirely, or going through the pregnancy alone. Her reflections were interrupted by a knock at the door, softer this time. She peered through the peephole, finding no one outside. Her nerves on edge, she opened it cautiously, expecting another nasty surprise. Instead, Lorena stood there, arms full of groceries. "I brought you some comfort food," she announced, "and decaf tea. Figured you'd want something soothing." Bianca nearly burst into tears of relief. She ushered Lorena inside, and they quickly set the items on the kitchen counter. Once the door was safely locked, Bianca showed Lorena the threatening note. Her friend's eyes flashed with anger. "This is sick," Lorena spat. "They have no right to treat you like this. So what if Richard's family is rich? That doesn't mean you're some gold digger." Bianca swallowed hard. "They think I'm a threat. I guess from their perspective, me popping up and now being pregnant is too suspicious. But they don't realize how terrifying this is for me." Lorena set a mug of tea in front of Bianca. "Well, you're not facing it alone. And remember, the babies need you calm and healthy, okay?" At the reminder of triplets, Bianca's free hand drifted to her abdomen protectively. "I wish I knew Richard was on my side," she murmured. "He says he is, but we keep missing each other. He's so swamped that I can't blame him, but it hurts." Lorena rubbed Bianca's shoulder gently. "He'll come around. It sounds like he's trying to shield you from his toxic family. But maybe you need to push for a direct conversation. No more waiting." Bianca nodded slowly, an idea forming. She could text him something direct, something that couldn't be brushed aside by lawyers or relatives. She glanced at Lorena. You're right. If I don't take the initiative, I'll just keep waiting for a moment that never comes." Later that night, after Lorena left, Bianca paced her apartment, phone in hand. The final rays of dusk faded beyond the window, city lights flickering on. She felt a tug toward the orchard where she and Richard had shared so many heartfelt conversations. It had been their place of calm, a pocket of normalcy amid all the turmoil. If they were going to have a real talk about triplets, the future, everything, maybe that orchard was the only safe space left. She sank onto the couch, heart pounding as she typed a single line. "Meet me at the orchard tomorrow. We need to talk." Before she could second-guess herself, she hit send. The message whooshed away into cyberspace, an invitation and an ultimatum all at once. If Richard truly wanted to be part of her life, he'd show up. If not, she'd have her answer, painful as it might be. Setting the phone aside, she pressed a hand against her belly again, trying to imagine 3 little lives, each clinging to her. Anxiety and anticipation churned together, making her pulse race. She had no idea if she could face Richard's family again or handle the barrage of insults that might come her way. Yet the babies deserved a chance to know their father, and she owed it to herself to see if Richard was willing to fight for them. The phone stayed silent for several minutes, then beeped with a message from him. "I'll be there, I promise." Her heart squeezed in her chest. Finally, a step forward, a glimmer of hope. She clutched the phone in trembling fingers. The orchard. Tomorrow. A chance to lay everything bare. She wished she could fall asleep easily, but the night promised little rest. Every fear, every dream, every possibility tumbled through her mind. If Richard was serious about standing by her, they might forge a new path together, despite his family's hostility. If not, she might have to raise 3 children alone. The thought sent a shudder of both fear and resolve through her body. Clutching her phone, Bianca closed her eyes. Tomorrow loomed large and uncertain, holding the power to unite them or break them apart forever. All she could do was pray that Richard would keep his word and meet her among those familiar fruit trees where their bond had first blossomed. She texts Richard a single line, "Meet me at the orchard tomorrow. We need to talk," and waits anxiously, heart pounding. Bianca arrived at the orchard just after sunrise, the world around her still cloaked in a gentle mist. Rows of peach trees shimmered beneath delicate droplets of dew, and bird calls echoed softly in the distance. She paused at the entrance to the farm's dirt path, breathing in the scent of wet earth and lingering night air. This spot held so many memories. Her first conversations with Richard, stolen moments under that battered old umbrella, the whispered hopes of a simpler future. She walked slowly, one hand resting protectively on her abdomen, where 3 tiny hearts now grew. There would be no more secrets today, no more running. She had asked Richard to meet her here, and despite all their trials, she believed he would keep his promise. Her pulse thrummed with nerves, but she reminded herself that the orchard had always brought them closer. Halfway down the row of trees, she noticed him, standing still amid the greenery, hands in his pockets, his gaze scanning the path until it settled on her. Even from a distance, she saw the tension in his stance, yet his face lit with relief the moment their eyes met. She wondered if he, too, felt how momentous this morning was. He closed the distance quickly, boots crunching on gravel. "You're here," he said softly, voice tinged with gratitude. "I was scared you might have changed your mind." She exhaled, forcing a small smile. "I couldn't. We need to talk about everything." She gestured vaguely at her stomach. "And about your family, your business, us." Richard nodded, his expression solemn. "I know, and this time I'm not letting anyone stop us from talking. I told them I had somewhere urgent to be, told them if they wanted to keep me as their figurehead, they'd have to wait." The orchard's rustling leaves filled the silence for a moment. Bianca lifted her gaze to meet his. "You really said that? That you'd walk away if they didn't let you come?" "Absolutely," he replied. I can't keep juggling obligations while ignoring the most important thing. This is our future." A wave of warmth washed over her at those words. The most important thing. She placed her hand over his, guiding it to rest on her belly. "It is ours, but I need to know you mean it. That no matter what your family says or how tough the business gets, you're going to stand by me. By us." He swallowed hard, running a thumb gently across the fabric of her dress. "Bianca, I want nothing more. I'm sorry I let them push you away before. I was so focused on saving the farms that I forgot what I was trying to save them for." "Triplets, Richard," she whispered, a shaky laugh escaping her. "We're having 3 babies." His eyes glowed with a mixture of awe and lingering fear. "I still can't believe it," he murmured. "But I'm overjoyed, terrified, but overjoyed." She let out a breath that was half sob, half laugh. "Welcome to my world." For a moment they just stood there, hands clasped over her abdomen, the orchard's breeze stirring the leaves in a hushed chorus. "I want you to come back," he said suddenly. "Not just to the farm, but to my life, to everything. Let me face down Andrew and the others. They're upset, but they'll have to accept the truth. You're carrying my children, and I choose to stand with you." Her heart pounded. She remembered the scornful note someone left, the attempt to pay her off, Andrew's harsh words. "And if they don't accept it?" His jaw set. "Then I'll run the farms without their blessing. I'm done letting them overshadow what I believe in. I want us to build a future here, turn these properties into something better than they ever were, so our kids can grow up proud of what we've created." Something in Bianca's chest unfurled, a mingling of hope and relief. "I can't pretend it's not scary," she admitted. "But I love you. I believe in what you're doing. I don't want to be attacked or threatened again." Richard pulled her into a gentle embrace, the orchard's quiet enveloping them. "They won't. Not while I'm here." He paused, voice turning serious. "I've already made arrangements, security at the farm, a clear warning that if anyone tries to intimidate you, they answer to me. And if Andrew tries to pull any more stunts, I'll remind him who actually owns the largest share of these lands." She let out a trembling breath, pressing her face to his chest. His heartbeat was strong and steady beneath her ear. Maybe they really could find a way through the chaos. Maybe those orchard nights would become the backdrop of a new life together. "Come with me," Richard said, stepping back and taking her hand. "There's something I need to do publicly, something to show everyone where I stand." They walked side by side through the orchard, eventually cutting across a clearing to the main farmyard. A cluster of workers milled about, many of them shooting curious glances their way. Word must have spread that Richard had returned with Bianca at his side. Some looked wary, others almost relieved. Amid the murmured chatter, Bianca recognized a few who had always been polite to her, if not exactly warm. Richard lifted a hand, calling out in a clear voice, "Could you all gather here for a moment? There's something I need to say." Heads turned, farm hands put down tools, and a small crowd formed. Off to the side, Bianca spotted Andrew stepping out of a truck with 2 men she recognized as investors. He froze upon seeing her, eyes narrowing, but Richard raised his voice before Andrew could intervene. "This farm has been my legacy for years," Richard began, meeting the gazes of the workers, "and I've made choices that some of you disagreed with. I've introduced new technology, pushed for change, and yes, there's been tension. But I never forgot that the heart of these farms is the people who work them and the families who rely on them." A few onlookers murmured agreement, others just listened. Andrew looked poised to cut in, but Richard pressed on. "I haven't always handled things perfectly," he admitted, "especially on the personal front. Some of you have seen arguments, confusion, and, well, more drama than you ever asked for." His eyes flicked to Bianca. "But this woman is Bianca, someone I love and respect. We're going to have children. Yes, multiple. And from this day forward, she's part of my life and part of these farms. I won't tolerate hostility toward her. If you stand with me, you stand with her." Andrew's face darkened, but a low ripple of conversation passed through the crowd. A handful of people looked surprised, others stunned. One older worker even managed a small smile. Someone in the group, a middle-aged woman Bianca recalled seeing in the orchard, spoke up. "So, we're not losing our jobs? The expansions still stand?" Richard nodded firmly. "Yes, we need these expansions for a sustainable future. That means adapting, upgrading, and exploring new markets. I won't force out anyone who's willing to learn, and that includes people who disagree with me, provided we keep it civil." Andrew finally stepped forward, jaw clenched. "Richard, you can't just sideline the family. We have final say over contracts, over the board's decisions." Richard turned to face him, voice resolute. "The board might have a say, but so do I, and I happen to hold the controlling share of these farms. I've checked the legal documents thoroughly." He paused, letting Andrew register the blow. "If you try to sabotage this or threaten Bianca again, I'll release you from all positions of authority. Do you understand?" A hush fell over the yard. Andrew's face burned with anger, but he seemed at a loss for words. The investors behind him exchanged uneasy glances. Bianca's heart pounded, but she stayed rooted, letting Richard shield her from Andrew's glare. In that moment, she saw the transformation in Richard's posture, a man no longer torn between pleasing everyone, but standing firm for the life he wanted. For them. Finally, Andrew turned on his heel and marched off, the investors trailing after him. The tension in the air lifted a notch. A few workers clapped hesitantly. Others simply nodded. One by one they returned to their tasks, leaving Richard and Bianca standing in the yard, breathing in the aftermath of a confrontation that had ended with no fists thrown, only truth spoken. She slipped her hand into his, voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you," she whispered. "That couldn't have been easy." He kissed her forehead, relief flooding his features. "I'd do it all again. For you. For the babies." Then, with a soft laugh, he added, "We might have to host a big farm celebration soon. Let everyone see we're united." "Didn't we already do that?" she teased lightly, glancing around at the disbanding crowd. He grinned. "In a more official capacity, maybe we can plan a party or maybe even a wedding here if that's not too fast." Her cheeks warmed, but an answering smile bloomed across her face. "I like the idea," she admitted, imagining a future among the orchards, with friends, family, maybe even some of his more open-minded relatives, celebrating life and new beginnings. "But let's get through the next few months first, okay? I'm going to need plenty of rest carrying 3 babies." His eyes widened playfully. "Right. Triplets. I can't wait." He rested a hand gently against her belly, then met her gaze. "But whenever we do it, we'll have the orchard filled with music and laughter, and I'll show everyone that the best harvest we've ever had isn't just about crops." Bianca leaned into his warmth, a laugh catching in her throat as tears of relief threatened. "You're sure you're ready for that kind of harvest?" she teased. He chuckled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I'm ready to face anything with you by my side." In the following weeks, word spread quickly that Richard had publicly claimed Bianca and their expected children. His family, though still resistant, gradually realized that alienating her would mean losing him and the successful momentum of the farm's future. Contracts stabilized, the expansions continued, and the orchard seemed more alive than ever, as if soaking up the new atmosphere of hope. Sometime later, whether it was weeks or months, a celebratory gathering finally took shape under the orchard's canopy. Rows of wooden tables brimming with fresh fruit and flowers lined the grassy clearing. Workers, neighbors, and a sprinkling of polite if cautious relatives mingled. The tension hadn't vanished entirely, but the mood was far lighter than Bianca could have imagined. At the heart of it all, She and Richard stood hand in hand, her slightly rounded belly gently visible now. As music filled the orchard, a figure she recognized from the farmhouse approached, a one-time villain who'd given her trouble. He offered a sheepish grin, producing a small folder of documents. "I found some old records," he muttered, clearing his throat awkwardly. "Turns out, the farm where you two first met was actually the first land Richard ever acquired in secret. Almost like it was fate you'd cross paths there." Bianca blinked, touched by the unexpected gesture. "Thank you," she said softly, feeling a sweep of warmth at the symbolic note. The man nodded, stepping back into the crowd. She turned to Richard, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Seems we were destined to meet," she whispered. He smiled, brushing a kiss over her knuckles, "and destined to grow a whole orchard of love." She leaned her forehead against his, letting the gentle laughter of the guests and the rustle of leaves surround them. "We're ready to receive the triplets, right?" Richard's responding laugh was warm and tender. "We might have our hands full," he said, eyes crinkling, "but we both know we've harvested more than tomatoes in these lands. 3 new little fruits are about to change our world, and I wouldn't have it any other way." He bent to kiss her, and as he did, the orchard shimmered with late afternoon sun, a promise of the vibrant, intertwined life they'd build, a harvest of hope, love, and family together. "Looks like we harvested more than tomatoes in these lands, Bianca. 3 new fruits will be born from this love." If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen